8-bit game from the third generation in a long time. And it's going to be even longer because this game isn't from that era.
Every once in a while, I get someone saying that I review too many modern games and that the word retro is in my channel's name and so on and so forth. And I ignore it because in reality, no one really cares what generation of game I review. For proof of that, I get constantly asked when I'm going to review the next new Sonic game that's coming out. So if Sonic is the exception to a rule that was never established in the first place, why should I adhere to it? Also, the more modern a game is, the longer the review is. The newer a game, the more there is to talk about. The older the game, the less there is to talk about, and I don't like repeating myself to add length to a review. I don't add in long, overdrawn gags that get tiresome after 5 seconds. I don't dress up or have fake guest characters all the time. In fact, I've only done that once. I'm just straight and to the point for a majority of the time unless I'm talking about my history with the game or the game's own development history, and any controversy surrounding it. I have no hidden agenda, and I'm very transparent. In fact, I tell you to go buy a game if I think it's worth it.
As of lately, I've been very clear that you should get a Wii U if you haven't already. It's got a lot of great games on it that live up to their hype, unlike a lot of the other AAA games that have been coming out this year.
I bought Shovel Knight sort of on a whim. I wanted to get some stuff off the Nintendo Network, so I got one of those cards for it. And I got this and Super Mario World and DuckTales Remastered. I heard good things about Shovel Knight and how it's such a good throwback to the NES, although it had parallax and the NES can't do that. And there's people analyzing the game to see if it could run on the NES, and the answer is a resounding no. The sprites are too detailed, the sound has too many channels, and there's colors that the NES didn't support. Yacht Club Games wanted to give the most authentic NES experience. The game was developed on the cheap. They only asked for $75,000 in their initial Kickstarter and raised $300,000, but that's chump change compared to what Mighty No. 9 raised. They were inspired by the NES DuckTales, Castlevania 3, Super Mario Bros. 3, and the Mega Man games. Manami Matsume, a composer for the original Mega Man games, even contributed 2 songs for Shovel Knight, and my favorite song is from the very first level. It's got a lot of energy and really gets you in the mood for an action platform game.
Now, artistically, it looks like a Nintendo game, but as mentioned earlier, that would be impossible. So it's probably more on par with what the Super Nintendo could do.
The art style really reminds me of the NES days. The cartoony, simplistic looking sprites just really give it that authentic feel of the late 80s, early 90s. Now, if the color palette was on par with the NES, then we'd really have something close to it. And if it was at a 4:3 ratio instead of a 9:16, then I'd say bust out the old CRT television and plug in the NES and fire up some Super Mario Bros. When you realize all the technical aspects between this and a real NES game, it breaks the illusion that you're playing something from those old gray cartridges. According to one of the articles that I read that broke down everything that Shovel Knight did wrong to be authentic to the NES, the sound is actually the closest thing to being authentic. However, those of us here in the West would never know, as the Japanese NES, known as the Famicom, had a connections for something known as a VRC6 chip, which added better graphics and added 3 more sound channels. The American NES lacked the connector for it. The music is really good and I enjoyed listening to it going through all the stages, and each track fits its respective level perfectly. And even though the technical aspects of the graphics took me out of the immersion, the music was able to bring me back into it.
Now, Shovel Knight is displayed at 1080p. Oh wait, it's probably 720p upscaled. Oh my god, I did not realize how retarded of a discussion that was until my Bayonetta 2 review last week. You wanna know my take on this whole resolution gate thing? Who gives a shit? The game looks fine, alright? End of discussion.
The gameplay is very much like an NES game. B jumps and Y will attack with your shovel. You can press down on the D-pad while in the air to use a shovel as a pogo stick like DuckTales, but unlike DuckTales, once you land on solid ground, it stops and you can only pogo off of enemies or destructible objects. You can press up on the D-pad with Y to use magic attacks from relics that you'll buy from NPCs. Pressing select will bring up your menu where you can switch relics and gear, so there's no using the shoulder buttons to cycle through anything. You have to switch your special weapons like the NES Mega Man games. Shovel Knight controls very much like an NES game. The physics are spot on. They're rather floaty, and that's just how you expect them to be. And like Castlevania, if you take a hit, you get knocked back and knocked back pretty far, resulting in many a death by being knocked into bottomless pits. When you die, you lose some of your treasure, but you're given a chance to grab it back as it floats around where you died. You're given infinite lives, so there's no real penalty for death other than the loss of money. You can destroy the checkpoints to get bonus items, but if you die, you're not able to use that checkpoint again unless you restart the level.
I wouldn't worry about losing money in this game because you will get more than enough, which is more than I can say for my gaming budget this month.
In terms of difficulty, it's not that hard of a game per se, and it's not really a challenge either. The enemies are extremely easy to kill, but there are times when the game feels like it's being cheap due to things hitting you and knocking you into instant death spikes or bottomless pits. The bosses may kill you the first time as you won't know their telegraphs or patterns at first, and it won't help if you're low on health. But once you figure out their telegraphs and patterns, you'll have no problem taking them down. But if you go off the beaten path and explore, then you'll really get hammered with a wall of difficulty. These extra rooms contain bonus gold that you'll be rewarded with if you can survive the journey to the end and back. The levels are linear, but there are easier routes on the rare occasion that you can take if you're able to get to them. But then you may miss out on treasure or healing items if you need them. And like DuckTales Remastered and Bayonetta 2, you can play this game on the Wii U's gamepad, which I did because I wanted to watch TV at the same time. I absolutely love this feature of the Wii U, but I only use it for inexpensive digital titles, because I prefer to play the bigger budget titles on the TV screen. I really hope that Sony and Microsoft come up with a peripheral like this someday. I suppose you can count the Vita, but it doesn't give you that real controller feel that the Wii U gamepad does.
Now you may be wondering if it's worth your money. Well, it's okay. I would suggest getting it on sale, though.
I honestly feel that I didn't get my money's worth. I got a $40 eShop card, got DuckTales Remastered, this game, and Super Mario World. I don't remember the pricing, but I think Shovel Knight was $15, and that's just a little too much for this game for what it has to offer. Maybe if it was $10 or $7, I'd feel a little more comfortable with the price to fun ratio, because I felt like I was just going through the motions here, playing something that I've played 1,000 times over, which is the problem with these games that are designed to be nostalgia trips. And when you bank on nostalgia and nothing else, you end up making something that's lacking its own identity. The story is a damsel in distress cliche, the combat mechanics are like DuckTales, the levels are similar to Mega Man, it's just really derivative. There's nothing wrong with being derivative though, just as long as you're not blatantly so and you're doing your own thing. Don't get me wrong, Shovel Knight is a very well constructed game, but it doesn't feel like it's bringing anything new to the table. But maybe that's the point. Maybe it's supposed to be a nostalgia trip and only that.
For its price, Shovel Knight is a decent game. It's not a must-own, but it is fun. Not $15 fun, but it's a nice blast from the past.